And we're live, so we're not allowed to swear now.
Oh, that's disappointing. That's my favorite thing to do.
Well, I mean, you
How
are a
are you?
runner,
You
so
well? Well, this is true. How are you? You doing well?
I am radiant, sir, and all the better for seeing you. How are you on this lovely day?
Good. I'm geared up and ready to learn. I feel
Okay.
very lucky to have a real tame podiatrist that we can ask questions for. So we've got a list. I've been onto my club. I know you'll be excited because I know you like to talk about feet.
I do
And
enjoy
I've been
feet.
onto my group. I've been onto my group and I've asked them, have they got any questions for a real life podiatrist? And yeah, they've given me a list. So I've come armed. And rumor has it you have the odd PowerPoint available, and you're a dab hand with that sort of thing.
I do, although I'm not planning on delivering a lecture because everyone would be asleep.
Well,
Most
that's
of what
true.
I do is I should introduce myself. I'm a podiatrist, so I work in a clinic. Podiatrist is not a foot doctor. You always say foot doctor, and it's not. We're
It's
healthcare
just easier
professionals.
to explain it.
It's different. It's different, but it's an unimportant difference, I suppose. Yes, so I've got two jobs. First of all, is I'm a jobbing podiatrist with a clinic in Headcorn, and secondly, I am a lecturer and educator of other podiatrists and FHPs. So I teach other people how to be podiatrists as well as doing it myself. And yes, by all means, I
Excellent.
offered to answer your members' questions. So, oh, and he's going. I've
I'm just
offended
opening the
him.
window because I'm a little hot and I've noticed my face is
It
getting
is
redder
warm
and redder
today.
in the camera. So I'm starting to warm up as I'm sat here. So, so I've just opened the window.
If you get orange
No,
enough,
that's
little
really
children will
exciting,
start
Rob, and we're
crossing the
really
road next
grateful.
to you.
We're really grateful to you. As I say, we appreciate your time because I think, yeah, we're all keen to learn, and why not learn it from the teacher's teacher, is what I say.
Okay.
So, shall I start you with our first question
Yeah,
then?
crack on.
Uh, Okay, so our first question is from a lovely runner of ours called Liz Hancock, and she says she has bunions,
Okay.
which are really bad. Is there anything I should look for in a running shoe? I'm currently in a wide fit Brooks with a podiatrist insoles. If I go too much, if I run too much, currently 3 times 5K a week, will I damage my feet? Age 65, young, Langton Green Group, and there was another lady who I
Well,
believe had an issue with bunions as well, someone else. So I think bunions is a common problem that some of our runners have. So perhaps we could start there.
okie dokie. That sounds like a good place to start. So the first thing we need to establish is what do we mean when we say bunion?
Mm,
Because bunion is not the technical term, which means it's mucky terminology, which means different people are going to mean different things.
yeah.
So I'll just have a quick Google.
Yeah, I can't. I don't actually know what a bunion. I know you get like a lump, get a hard lump on the edge of your big toe, don't you? Is that a bunion?
Yeah, something along those lines. Let me share my screen.
Mm,
So this is what most people will think of as a
yeah,
bunion,
that's
sticky out bit on the
yeah,
side
that's
of
what sprung to my mind.
the big toe joint. But that's actually made up of lots of different things. If you look at that foot, you've got a deformity there in terms of the bone is going out to the side. You've got a deformity there in terms of the big toe is coming across left to right,
Yeah,
and you've
it's
got a
sort of bent
sticky out
over.
bit,
Mm.
a bony sticky out bit on the side of the joint, and you've got a soft tissue sticky out bit on the side of the bony sticky out bit. So if somebody tells me they've got a bunion, first thing I need to establish is what are we actually talking about? Is it the skeletal malformation? Is it the pain on the side, or is it something else? So I'm going to go ahead and assume that what we've got here is the sort of the deformity flavor of it, something that looks a bit like that. Um,
Mm.
if it is that shape, the first thing you need to realize is that that is not a pathology. That is not a deformity. That is not something which is necessarily bad. That is a genetic variant.
Oh,
About
okay.
23% of the population have this shape between the big toe and the foot. And that 23% includes the vast majority who never have a day's trouble with it. who never have a day's pain with it.
Oh, okay.
It is a different shaped foot. So what we
Is it
mean when
just
we
a
talk,
variation, is
it is
it?
exactly that. So I, for example, have a nose which activates automatic doors 3 minutes before the rest of me arrives. That is look, that is not a deformity. That's just a variant. It's just that bit of me happens to be bigger
Yes.
than everything else. This can be that way. And the
Yeah, that
reason for
makes sense.
that is genetics,
Hmm.
because your
Yep.
foot is basically a slightly rubbish hand. From an evolutionary
Okay.
point of view, it evolved like this. Um, and if you've got four, I'll just stop the sharing there. If you've got four digits that are straight and one out to the side, that
Mhm.
means that your foot can grab
Yep.
hold of a branch. So a
Mm.
million years ago, we're running around on the forests and we're having to grab hold of things. Or if you go to Monkey World and you look at orangutans, you'll see that. Um, that's how we evolved. And then as we became bipedal and started walking and running, the big toe started to close in to be parallel to the rest of the toes. But it's not like that for everyone. So
Oh, really? So they're
if
less evolved.
well, we don't like differently evolved. It's not
Well,
kind
that's fair.
to say to somebody that they are unevolved. Patients tend to get quite emotional when you say that to them. But
Yeah,
just to
that's a bad thing.
it is, yeah, we don't like that. We don't like that. But just to show you what I mean, um, that foot there, that's an Australopithecus foot. So this is our immediate ancestor, and you can see the big toe is sticking out to the side. Now, if you never wore a
Yeah.
shoe, then our person with a bunion would have a foot that looked a bit like that. But because we do wear a shoe, and there's no shoe in the world that will accommodate that shape, it pushes the big toe over, and that's your bunion. So that's the sort of
Is it true? Is it true that that if we didn't wear shoes, we would have space between our toes naturally? They'd spread
if
out
you've
more
got that foot
naturally.
shape, yes. If you
Okay,
happen to
yeah.
have a foot which is like that, then it will look like that. And if we have a look at our boy Usain Bolt here, and I actually have this picture hanging up in my clinic to show people. Cop a look at the bunion on that one.
Mm.
And that is
Yeah.
magnificent. He's also coincidentally completely flat-footed. There's no arch there whatsoever.
Oh,
The lateral
yeah.
side of his foot's come off the ground. And if you look at some of the later pictures, he's also got an overriding second toe, and he seems to be looking pretty good on it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to affect him.
It doesn't seem to slow him down. So the
No, not at all.
first answer to the question is, if it is simply that the foot's a funny shape, that the big toe joint is coming across, it's not a pathology, it shouldn't cause you any problems, don't worry about it, it's just genetics. The times where it causes problems is where that sticky out bit gets sore on the outside. And that is
Yeah.
very simply because a shoe is pressing in on it. And that causes the actual inflammation and pain on the outside of the joint. That's the bursitis. On a technicality, that's what the bunion is. It's an inflamed bursitis. And if that's the case, you've got two
Hmm.
options to be comfortable. You can either make your shoes foot shape, i.e., get shoes that fit your feet,
Hmm.
or you can make your feet shoe shape, i.e., get surgery. Um, it is always best
Oh,
to
I see. Okay.
start with making the shoes foot shape. So, in terms of which running shoes to select, running shoes are a bit like cars. There's lots of different manufacturers, and they all have a sort of theme that runs across them. So, Hoka are very,
Mm.
very, very supportive and very wide and very solid. Adidas tend to the narrow end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Asics tend to the wider and softer and more cushioning. New Balance tend to the more springier sort of performance end of the market. Um, Obviously, light car manufacturers, in the same way as Ford make a little car and a people carrier, and Mazda make a little car and a people carrier, and Mercedes make a little car and a people carrier. There's lots of variation within the manufacturers. But as a general rule of thumb, if you've got a very, very wide foot at the front because you've got a bunion, you're
Hmm.
probably looking at Asics being something worth trying. Um, New Balance do some nice wide ones as well, but I would tend to avoid Adidas, Reebok, Nike. They tend to be narrower unless you happen to find
Yeah,
one.
I've got Brooks, and I've got quite well. I haven't got a bunion, but I've got wide feet, and I find that I think Brooks do a wide toe box
Yeah.
version, and
Well,
I've found that's made me much more comfortable.
Brooks have a more of a selection. They do wide fit and narrower fit. So, what was the full question again? It was about
Yeah,
what running
let's go back. So let's
shoes.
make sure we answered it. So we said the question was it was Debbie, sorry, Liz's question. I have bunions which aren't really bad. Is there anything I should look for in a running shoe? Currently, she's in the wide fit Brooks with
Yeah,
podiatrist insoles. If I run too much, currently 3 times 5 a week, am I going to damage my feet? 65 years young.
brilliant,
So
absolutely lovely.
I think
So
yeah. So running with bunions, is it okay?
absolutely fine because if it wasn't, then Usain Bolt wouldn't be able
Mm,
to do it. Um,
exactly that.
the
Yeah.
the bunion is purely what shape it is in that plane, in the transverse plane. As you look down on your foot at the angle of the big toe, that's what the bunion is. And yeah, as long as the shoe is wide enough, then it's fine. Now, important to point, that is if the
Hmm.
problem is the shape of the big toe. If the problem is that the big toe won't bend enough, that is a
Yeah.
that is quite a different story. That is a what's called a hallux limitus. That is a stiffness in the big toe joint. And if that's the case, then
Yes, I've
yes,
had that.
100%, that can cause problems, and there are things that you should do and shouldn't do. But that is a different thing, different question to whether or not there's a bunion there. You can have a big
Yeah.
old bunion that bends like silk and has got a beautiful range of movement, brutal quality of movement, or you can have a big toe which is as straight
Hmm.
as an arrow but bends like a rusty hinge, and grinds and
Yeah, that's
cracks and
exactly what
crunches
happened with
and
my big
hurts.
toe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that with
Um,
my big toe, and it was causing me to pronate, or was it supinate or whatever? Because when I was landing towards my big toe, because there was no flex in it, it was
yeah.
pushing my sort of stride over, and I had to do some flexibility stuff with my big toe in order so that I could run smoother and without the knocking my gait off. So,
Yeah.
um,
Sometimes that you can bring the flexibility back. Sometimes you can compensate for it. A lot of the abnormalities that we see are
mm.
compensations for a pathology. So your
Oh, I
body,
see.
your feet are tremendously adaptable. Your feet are not
Mm.
like a Formula One car, which has to run perfectly on exactly smooth ground with a perfectly tuned engine in perfect alignment. And if it goes, it goes even a little bit wrong, then the whole thing flies apart. Your feet are much more like a Toyota
Mm.
Hilux that you can drop off the side of a building,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
that can go over all sorts of weird and wonderful terrain. And if one bit of it doesn't work, it's very, very possible that another bit will compensate and pick up the slack. If you look at the feet of anybody over the
Hmm.
age of about sort of 20, there will be joints that aren't working as they
Hmm.
should or as we would like,
Yes.
and other joints that are picking up the slack and adapting around it.
Hmm.
So your feet do not need to be perfect. We do not like the idea of there being a normal foot or an ideal foot,
Hmm.
or heaven forbid, a foot that is in good alignment, because those sort of
Hmm.
suggest there's only one good way for a foot to work. Um,
Yeah.
and like
No,
I
I see
say,
that.
our boy Usain Bolt there, jolly nippy,
Yeah.
in spite of the fact that he's as flat as a
Mm.
pancake and has got a bunion the size of a Setsuma. Um,
So it's not a bad thing to have flat feet, and it's not a bad thing to have bunions. It's just a different thing, a different way.
yeah.
It's a different way of having a foot, and it doesn't mean that you're limited anyway. So going back to the bunions, you said if they have been banging against the shoe or there's been a shoe problem, you said it can turn into like a bursitis, which
Yes,
is what?
that's
Can
on
you
the
explain
outside
that?
of.
And then how should they treat that?
Okay, so a bursa anywhere in your body is a fluid-filled sac that your body
Hmm.
forms to protect the deeper structures from harm. So most bursa are what's called adventitious, which means that they form in response to trauma. So if you spend a lot of time on your hands
Hmm.
and knees, you will
Hmm.
get a lot of pressure on that nubbly bit on the front of your knee. I know this is my elbow, not my knee, but I can't get my knee up high enough. Um,
I'd like to see you try though.
That, all right, that bit there.
Oh, Mr.
And you develop a
Flexible.
bursa there, and that would be called housemaid's knee. If you
I was going to
sleep on it,
say, is that what the housemaids
that's
need?
housemaid's knee. If
Yeah.
it's on the back of your heel from wearing high heel shoes, pump bump, that's a calcaneal bursa. And
Oh, I've not heard of that one.
if it's on the outside of your big toe joint, that's your bunion. The bursa initially forms
Yeah.
to protect it, and it will do a good job of that. But if you overload it even more, then the bursa itself becomes inflamed, and that's what causes the pain. It basically overfills. That is purely and simply a mechanical trauma from outside. So that is just the shoe pressing on it. And the only solution to that
Hmm.
is either have the shoe with enough space or with a stretched bit for the
Hmm.
bunion to sit in. You can put gels over the top and that sort of thing, but it doesn't work brilliantly well. Truthfully, the best thing is to make
Mm.
sure, as I say, you've either got to have shoe-shaped feet or feet-shaped shoes. That's the only way to be comfortable. And yes,
Oh, that's great. That's
you're
really good.
quite right. Bunions, pronated feet, supinated feet. None of these are inherently by themselves a problem. Sure, they can
What
lead
about
to
the heel
problems.
striking? They do talk about there's a big thing in the running world about heel striking
Yeah,
being like worse than the devil.
yeah,
But some people naturally heel strike and they run really well. So what's your thoughts on that?
100%. Um, the what you've got to think is that not every body is the same. Not everybody's physical
Mm.
frame is the same. Think of us as being like dogs. You know, you got Dachshunds and you got Greyhounds. Now, you could say
Yes.
Greyhounds run faster than Dachshunds, and that's true.
Mm.
But if you were to then say, right, we're going to study exactly how a Dachshund runs, and we're going to try and make this, sorry, study how the Greyhound runs and try and make the Dachshund run the same
Yeah.
way, because obviously that's a better way for a dog to run. And then you try and make a Dachshund run in the same style as a Greyhound, it's going to be bouncing along the ground with its little
Exactly.
sausage belly. That style won't work for
Yeah, of
that
course.
body shape. So, in terms of
Hmm.
heel striking, for some people, heel striking is the best way for them to run. For other people, heel striking is the worst way for them to run. Some people midfoot strike, some people forefoot strike, some people heel strike. Um, we don't know that one way is superior to another because we've got no way of measuring that.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, okay. Interesting.
what we can say is that there are more heel strikers than forefoot strikers. But that's just a description. That doesn't say what's best. Um,
Hmm.
so no, it again, if you go back even 10, 20 years, we were all about okay, we know what optimal looks like. You know, the rear foot should be vertical and should pronate and supinate within a certain range. You should heel strike, laterally
Yeah.
load, pronate, supinate, propel off. We're a bit less dogmatic about it now because we now understand that humans are different. I
Yeah.
remember forefoot strike. So if you were to try and run with heel strike, you'd probably hurt yourself.
Yeah. It feels really
Whereas,
awful. Yeah.
yeah, that also speaks to barefoot running, but I could talk for an hour on that without drawing breath. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. Right, let's keep that's brilliant. Let's get another question in there
okay.
then.
Sorry,
I
I
think
do
that one
ramble.
comprehensively answered it for Liz there. No, no, not at all, not at all. I want to make sure we answer as many of the questions as we can for our team.
Yeah, we've
But
only
I
got
think that
about
was
an hour
a
because I've got
really good
somewhere to be.
answer,
So,
and I learned so much. Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so the next one was, oh, this is a good one because I had the same issue. It's from Gwen,
mhm.
one of our Bexley Heath members, and she's very lovely. She says she has reoccurring issues with her Achilles tendon,
Yeah,
but there doesn't seem to be any pattern to it. Is there sort of any exercises that will strengthen the muscle so I don't hobble around? So my first question is it a muscle? And if not, can you explain a little bit more about it?
cool. Yes, I absolutely can. So the Achilles tendon isn't a muscle, but it's attached to a muscle.
Mhm.
So basically, the muscle in your whole body, you've got a muscle belly, which is the bit that gets shorter and longer, and then that's attached
Mhm.
at the end to a tendon, which is not capable of contracting and shortening, and then that bit's attached to the bone.
Yes.
So it's like a guy rope on a tent, basically. So you've got your heel bone becomes the Achilles tendon, then you've got the gastrocnemius over the top and the soleus underneath, and that makes up your calf muscle. So if
Can
you've
you show
got,
us that? Can you do a Google picture for
I
us, Rob,
can
to
I
show us what
can
you're saying? Because
100% do that. Yeah, sorry,
I think it
my
might be easier then if you. It's just if you we can point, and then I think it'll help people visualize it a little bit better.
yeah. Please hold, caller. You just hum some elevator music for a minute.
Sorry, I got you spontaneous there.
You
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Greensleeves, isn't it?
Usually, yeah.
Here we
There we go.
go.
So that's not a bad not a bad picture. So there's the tendon. That's the sort of inert bit, and then you can see just up the back that becomes the muscle, and there's the deeper muscle and the more superficial muscle. So first things first. If you have something that is constantly painful, as in it doesn't matter whether you are on it, whether you are off it, what you're doing on it, the pain doesn't adjust. It's a 6 out of 10 day and night. We friggin' hate that
Yeah.
as clinicians, because it
Mm.
means that it doesn't fluctuate, doesn't undulate. There's nothing we can do. If, on the other hand, you have good days and bad days,
Mm.
good moments, bad moments, there is a pattern, there is a causal link, something that is being done or worn or eaten or metabolically or autoimmune system, or something is making the good days good and the bad days bad.
Yeah, there is a
So
cause to that effect. Yeah, makes
exactly that.
sense.
We might not know what it
Mm.
is, and it might be jolly difficult to work it out, but something is going to be aggravating it. It might not be something you expect. So in the case of Achilles tendonitis, that could be shoes, because just physically something on the outside of it rubs. It could be that it's not Achilles tendonitis. There are plenty of things which, well, not
Yep.
plenty, but there are a few things which mimic Achilles tendonitis but aren't. It could be the amount of
Is
time
that
you.
like a heel spur? I've heard of heel
No, that's
spurs, and
underneath.
they
That's a different thing.
so that wouldn't. But would it give a different sort of pain? Would it give a
Completely
similar
different.
sort of
Yeah,
pain, or is
different,
oh,
different
in which
place.
case discard
Discount that
that.
one. It could be autoimmune, because if you have problems with your body attacking itself, then you might eat Brussels sprouts and your immune system goes a bit mad, and then you get inflammation somewhere because of that. It could be the amount of standing you do, because standing can do more harm than running. It could be the style of running you do, the surface you run on, could be one of a million things. But the point is, something will
Yes.
be aggravating it. In terms of how we treat it, first thing we have to establish is it definitely Achilles tendonitis? And the best way of doing that is you need to get it looked at by someone. But assuming it is, or if you're comfortable with your self-diagnosis, Achilles tendonitis does respond to stretching, but not in the way that people think, because very few people understand correctly how stretching works. What you tend to think is Achilles tendonitis, it must be because the Achilles is short, the calf muscle tendon complex is too short. So what you do is you wrap a towel around the end of your foot and you pull it back, or you push it up against the wall and push your foot back. And people imagine that what that does is it makes your muscle and tendon unit longer, and then there's less stress in it.
It gives it more slack. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. Now just think about the physics of that for a moment. When you run and you propel off with your foot, the amount of tension in the Achilles tendon is about 5,000 newtons. In everyday
That
money,
sounds a lot, but
it's
what's that
about
equivalent to?
500 kilograms.
That is a
Yes,
lot through that
yes,
little
half a
bit of
ton.
string at the back of your ankle.
It
That's
absolutely is.
insane.
So that means that every step you take when you're running, you are stretching that tendon 5,000 newtons worth of force. Now, that doesn't make it
Goodness
longer,
me.
does it? Because if it does, then every time you went
No.
for a run, you'd end up with longer tendons. So if that doesn't do
Mm.
it with 500 kilograms worth, how much do you think your little red TheraBand pulling back on your foot?
Yeah, it's
It's
just not
not going
doing
to make
anything,
it
is it?
longer, is it? So
No.
that's not what stretching does. What stretching does do, though, is first of all, it trains the muscle to be more used to operating at length. So you know this from the
Hmm.
gym, because I know you're a gym bunny. When you're working your biceps, you don't just do one rep, you do short range and you do long range for the long head and
Yes.
the short
You
the
have
short head.
the two head on the muscle, yeah.
Just so. So if you are pulling steadily on it for 60 seconds, then you are teaching the muscle, yes, you can be at this range and it's okay. So the muscle is less likely to reactively fire back when it gets pushed to its end range.
Yeah, it's like a dancer learning to do the splits, yeah.
Just
You're
so.
just
Just so.
progressively over time teaching your body it's okay to stretch out this far.
Yeah. The other way, and this is much more important, this is why stretching relieves Achilles tendonitis and most tendonitis, is that when the tendon becomes inflamed, that's what itis means. Itis, anything with itis in it is inflammation. So
Oh, okay.
when you've got a tendonitis and the tendon swells, and the tendon is sitting inside a tendon sheath. So think of it as like a rope inside a hose pipe, and the hose pipe is there so that the rope doesn't get abraded on all the other surfaces. That rope is now bigger. If you've
Oh,
tied a
right.
knot in a rope, the tendon sheath starts to get muddled up with the tendon. And if you look at it on an
Oh, okay.
ultrasound scan, you can actually see they're called neovascularizations, little bits of blood vessels and nerves growing into the tendon. And that's what causes the pain because
Mm.
it's sort of getting muddled up, it's getting stuck to it. So when you do a stretch, what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're pulling the tendon within the tendon sheath to free up the tendon
Yeah.
from the tendon sheath. It's a slight
Mm.
abuse
Yeah, so
of
so it
science to
doesn't
describe
stay
it.
stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's
Mm.
a very specific way that this has to be done, which I shall now find for you. Um, and it's called
And
Alfredson's
it does
protocol.
work, by the way, because this
Yeah.
is what I went to Rob for, as my friend and podiatrist, and said, I think I've got Achilles tendonitis. And he put me on a program of doing this very exact exercise. And it's the only thing I've ever done that's given me relief to it. And I still have the pain, but as soon as it comes, I know exactly to do this. So, tune in and keep your eyes on this because this is definitely a solution that worked for me.
So Alfredson's protocol, chap called Hakon Alfredson who wrote the book on this. It is an eccentric stretch. What that means, it's not eccentric as in you do it with a teacup balanced on your head. It means that the muscle is extending while it's being stretched. Because if you think about it, when you go up on
Is
tiptoes, your tendon is being stretched, isn't it? It's being pulled,
Yeah.
but your muscle is shortening. Whereas an
Yes.
eccentric stretch is where everything is lengthening.
Just
So
script
what
out,
you
yeah.
do is, and this is a video I've used on Facebook before. So you stand on a step with your foot sort of level to the ground,
Hmm.
and go up on both heels, disengage one foot, down on one, up on both, disengage, down on one, up on both, disengage, down on one. So you're going
You
up
can do that
on,
on any step, can't you?
yeah, you can
You can
do it
do
on
that on
a
your
bit of
stairs.
two
You could do that
before,
on
you
a
could do it on your bathroom
curb. Yeah.
scales, you could, stick a book on the ground while you're boiling the kettle.
Yeah.
Um,
Excellent.
but basically, you go up on both so that you're not shortening, so you're not doing a concentric on the one that's hurting, but you go down just on that one, and you try and make the
Hmm.
heel go lower than the forefoot, lower than that.
So you want to drop the heel lower than the step, yeah?
Just so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's perfectly okay to use something to balance, to hold on something for balance, and I would very much recommend that you do. The other thing that people don't get with this is just how much you've got to do it to make a difference. So it's
Yes, a
180
lot.
drops per day. And that is made up of 3 lots of 15 reps. So you do 15 drops, have a rest, another 15 drops, have a rest, another 15 drops, have a rest. You do that 4 times a day, which is a
You
heck
get
ton.
so much in the habit that you just do them anytime you're stood around somewhere. You'll see a curb and you'll think, oh, I'll do some drops. And
Yes.
It
Yeah,
took me
if
2 weeks, 2 weeks
the
for it to really sort of make a big difference.
the best way of doing it is to build it into your everyday life. So if you can put the step somewhere that you're going to be standing for 3 or 4 minutes next to the kettle for when you boil your cup of tea, in the bathroom when you brush your teeth,
Mm.
or when you're drying your hair. Um,
Yeah.
sorry, Steve, that was insensitive.
Polish my head, we say in our
Polish your
house.
head. Um,
Wash my big face.
any of those. That's the protocol for if you've got a full-on Achilles tendonitis. If you've just got a little bit of
Mhm.
grumbling discomfort, you probably don't need to be that committed. But
Mm.
that's the exercise to do when it gets sore. And you do that for a week, couple of weeks, you should find it starts moving more freely. Um,
Mm.
long structures, muscles, ligaments, tendons, fascia loves to be moved. They love to be stretched when they're injured. They love to be loaded when they're injured. So the worst thing
Mm.
you can do for a ligament or a tendon or a muscle is to do nothing for 6 weeks and then try and get back into what you were doing at the level that you were doing it before. If you injure a muscle, a ligament, a tendon, depending on what grade the tear is, usually
Mm.
it's rest it 2 or 3 days tops. Rest and ice and elevation 2 or 3 days. Then you start loading it.
Yeah.
You load it to the point of discomfort, but not to pain.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
that will change as it gets stronger as it heals. And what's happening there is where your collagen should all be nice and lined up. The fibers that make up a tendon should all be like that, all nice and neat. But when you tear them, you get what's
Yeah.
called cross linkages, and they
Oh, I
connect
see.
across. And although it's thicker,
Hmm.
it's weaker because of those
Yeah.
cross linkages. Think of it like if you get a ball of wool off a fence, a sheep's gone by and left some wool behind. You can get a great big chunk of wool
Yeah.
and you can just pull it apart very easily. Whereas a
Yeah.
strand of
Yeah.
wool, where it's all in a line, you can't. So it's like that. So what we don't want is for it to heal like that in 6 weeks,
Hmm.
and then the first time you try and use it again, you've retorn it.
Yeah.
So what you
Which is so
want,
strange because isn't this advice they used to give that you have to complete rest for weeks and
yeah,
weeks? So it
we're
seems to
learning,
be at odds. So
we're
now it is
learning.
more. It's this functional movement of the muscle when it's injured helps its healing
Yeah,
process.
you
Because
want
and didn't you say
constant.
something about ibuprofen to do with this as well?
Yeah,
Is
I'll
that
come on to that. But constant
okay? Yeah.
low grade loading just to the point of discomfort, it will heal in a much
Hmm.
more sturdy way. It will heal in a much more robust way. And yes, you're quite
Hmm.
right. We've changed. And we are continuing to
Mm.
change. That is the nature of science. We have things that we thought were true and we test them constantly.
Hmm.
And if we find out it's not true, we respond to the evidence and we change what we believe.
Which is
And
great.
I don't know of the stuff I believe today. I know that some of it in 5 years' time, I will look back on with cringe in my heart because at that point it will be wrong. But I don't know which bits yet because we gotta
No, of
keep
course.
waiting. Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, ibuprofen. Ibuprofen,
Mm.
an anti-inflammatory, used to be the recommendation. Anytime you injure something, you dose yourself up on ibuprofen, because the common conception is that inflammation is a bad thing. People talk about
Yeah.
foods that fight inflammation and medicine to fight inflammation.
Yeah.
Inflammation wouldn't have evolved into us if it was negative to survival. We would
Mm.
not have that as a mechanism. It's such a huge part of our physiology. You want to see inflammation, all you got to do, bang the wall, knuckles go red. That's inflammation. Um,
Yeah.
it's built into us. Think about what happens when you injure yourself and you get inflammation. First of all, you get redness, which is more blood coming to the area. Along with the more blood, you get more white blood cells. So if you've cut yourself, you need the enhanced immune response. So you get more immunity. You get something called growth factor, which is a sort of chemical messenger that your body uses to say this bit of the body needs repair. This bit of the body needs more resources
Mm.
and it needs more cellular turnover. You get swelling, which kind of splints the tissue. and means it won't move around as much. And you get pain, which is your body's way of saying, okay, that thing you did, I didn't like that. Could we not do that so much for a bit
Mm.
now, please? All of which
Yeah.
are helpful to healing. And then what we do
Hmm.
is we dose ourselves up on massive doses of naproxen and ibuprofen and all that sort of thing, and we switch off that system. And what we now understand is that if you've got somebody with a bone injury or a ligament injury or a muscle injury, and they take lots of anti-inflammatories over a protracted period, they will heal slower than if they hadn't done that.
Really?
It delays healing. Um,
That's
we can
so.
use them.
What's our options for pain then? Because
Um,
obviously, if it's really sore, what would you suggest?
analgesics, paracetamol.
Yeah.
Paracetamol does not impede healing in any way, shape, or form. And
Okay.
anti-inflammatories are okay to use, but you use them judiciously. You
Yes.
use them now and again. So if you've got a Achilles tendonitis, let's say, and you've got a race coming up, and you want it to be as fit as possible for the race, what you don't do is you don't take it all the time you're training because you're getting in the
Hmm.
way of the healing at that point. But on the morning of the race, before you go out for your race, by all means, you take it so that it's not inflamed during that short period of time.
Yes.
So you can use it, but sparingly. The analogy I like is
Sparingly. Yeah.
think of inflammation as builders. Now, if you've had an injury, you've had
Hmm.
the roof's fallen in your kitchen, and there's plaster everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's all a mess. You're going to need builders in to fix it, and those builders are going to be a pain. They're going to be noisy. They're going to eat all your hobnobs. They're going to tramp mud
Yeah.
through your house. Um,
Yeah.
you don't want the builder. The builders are a pain. The inflammation is the builders. So,
Yeah.
but if you
It's a means
say
to an end, at
get
the
rid of the
end, you'll have it
builders, if you
fixed.
say lots of anti-inflammatories, we're going to stop the builders coming in at all, in 6 weeks' time, your kitchen's
Mhm.
still a mess. Whereas if
Yes, of
you allow
course.
them in, it's fine. However, if you've got a couple of friends coming over just for one evening for a dinner, you can say to the builders, just
Hmm.
just for that one day, don't turn up, please. I want to be
Yeah,
able
go
to
away.
function
I
without you
see.
for
So you
that
can
one
delay
day.
it for a day or so, but don't
Yeah.
delay it for a week or
Couple of
whatever. Yes,
doses
I
is
see.
fine, but long-term use actually slows down healing for musculoskeletal things. Um,
I
the
see.
the
So,
the best
okay, that
place
makes a lot of
for
sense.
anti-inflammatories is where the inflammation is the problem. So when the inflammation is
Hmm.
not a proportionate response to an injury, but it is in itself the pathology, like gout, for example,
Hmm.
which is where you've
Yeah.
got too much inflammation based on too much of the chemical messenger which creates inflammation, uric acid, monosodium urate, if you
Hmm.
want to be accurate. Um, the inflammation is serving no useful purpose whatsoever. It's a false alarm. We've got builders tramping the way through the house looking
Yeah.
for the damage which isn't there. Rheumatoid
Oh,
arthritis,
okay.
polymyalgia, these are all things where builders are turning up in your house to repair stuff that isn't broken.
Because we have a lot of trouble. This is something I've dealt with quite a lot, actually, particularly women with rheumatoid arthritis. I don't know if it's something specific to women, but rheumatoid arthritis, and they always say that they have flare-ups or
Yeah.
they have, they have good days and bad days. But I obviously not suffering with it myself. I don't quite understand. So perhaps you could explain that. I'm getting a
Yeah,
phone call.
that rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory condition, which is to say
Mhm.
that your body responds to your own tissues as if they were an invader. So your immune
Mm,
system is constantly tooling around your body looking for stuff that shouldn't be there. And if it spots something that it shouldn't be there, it goes in and beats it up.
I
Um,
see.
think of it as the policeman in your body, sort of tooling
Hmm.
around. If you're in Maidstone High Street shopping, that your policeman's not interested in you. If you're in Maidstone High
No.
Street chucking a brick through a window, then they're going to drag you off and do things to you. Autoimmune disease is where the policemen become a little bit oversensitive, and
Or
they're
they're
like,
road cops.
that chap there looks like he might be about to throw a brick through a window, so we're going to go and beat him up. That bit of joint tissue doesn't look quite right. We're going to inflame that. Um,
Okay.
so in that situation, yes, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and even steroids, methotrexate, prednisolone, that sort of thing, are exactly the right thing to do. Um,
Excellent.
But in the same way as you don't want to get rid of all the police, because then you get rid of them responding to the things that should be responded to. You don't want to be using
Of course, yeah.
anti-inflammatories.
Which is what they have when you have immunosuppressed people who,
Yes.
have had chemo or stuff. They haven't got any policemen at all, have they?
Yes.
And
Or
they're in a
steroids.
situation where they're stuck.
People who take steroids for conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, although the benefits are that they're not attacking their bodies anymore, the downside is that their bodies are less able to respond to infections and threats.
And when you say steroids, and this is probably this isn't the same as
No.
steroids for bodybuilders.
It's not
it's
anabolic
a different
steroids.
kind of.
These are anti-inflammatory steroids. Yeah.
So they're like a beefed up ibuprofen for
exactly
a layman that you inject. Yeah. Whereas steroids, like when you hear the word steroids, if you take steroids, you're not going to get big muscles, which is often a confusion people have when you hear that word.
Sadly not. No, a steroid is just a more advanced anti-inflammatory. So at the low end, really low end, you've got sort of aspirin, that's a bit anti-inflammatory. Then you've got ibuprofen, which is a bit more so. Then you've got naproxen, which is even more so. And then there's a line, and then the other side of that line, we've now got the steroids. So there's your methotrexate, your prednisolone, that sort of thing, which can be injections or they can be tablets. How much we use a principle called treat to target, which is you've got an appropriate amount of inflammatory response in your body. And if it's too much, we want to push it down that way, but we don't want to push it too far because then you end up with too big a response.
Exactly. No, that makes exact sense.
So
should we finish with one last question then?
Yeah, go on then.
Can I squeeze one last question?
I think you can get one more
hour, but we can talk for England. I think our last question then. I am going to have a quick look. So for anyone who hasn't had their question answered today, obviously I hope you find Rob as interesting as I do. I love learning, and we're hoping to put together, if this is popular and people enjoy it, we're hoping to put together a few more videos to explain things. And I think Rob's excited about that. I think we're going to talk about toenails, if that's all right, because we had 3 questions on this, and obviously with the marathons not long past. So we've got one from Tina Stickles. She says she's always losing toenails. They go black and drop off once the new ones come along. It's a continuation. We also had a Debbie Tapley, one of our managers from Canterbury. She's a very lovely lady. And she lost a toenail after the marathon. It grew back, but it came back really thick. And now she's struggling to cut the toenail. And it's tender after long runs. And finally, there was one other, which I thought maybe you could include this in your answer, and that's from Alison. She's just saying when she runs, her feet go numb. She's got wide toe box and she's got loose laces. No one else. Basically, she's all out of answers and nothing to suggest. So maybe you've got a little suggestion for her there. And I really wanted to find out about plantar fasciitis, but we're going to put a pin in that for next week's chat.
Another day.
Because plantar fasciitis and shin splints.
Don't put pins in plantar fasciitis.
Don't put a pin. But definitely not. That will not help. But no. For sure, we'll talk about shin splints, knees, and plantar fasciitis next time, because I think they're all things that affect but we've got to give you a reason to watch next week, haven't we?
There you go.
Are you ready, Rob? Are you happy with that?
Okay, so we'll start at the end. As far as the foot going numb is concerned, definitely more information required. Things aren't meant to go numb. So if they are,
what is numbness? What does that mean, Rob? What is
loss of?
I know we get pins and needles
sensation.
Numbness.
Yeah. So basically, your nerves are carrying signal from your skin, sensory information from your skin to your brain. Numbness is where there is a lack of signal. Pins and needles is when there is a misfiring of signal. Pins and needles is something that happens when nerves are confused and they start sort of sparking off randomly. Numbness is a lack of sensation. So true numbness, you don't feel. True loss of sensation doesn't feel like anything. It's a bit like when you have an injection at the dentist. It doesn't feel weird until you touch it, and then it really does.
Yeah, and then you're like, I get it all the time. I sit cross-legged, and then I'll go to stand up, and my leg doesn't work. And so then when it doesn't work at all, and then you get the pins and needles where it's starting to come back to life, and then it hurts. and
So
it hurts and wakes up, and then.
when you sit cross-legged, that goes numb because you cut the circulation off.
Mhm.
And that's why it takes a minute to come back. That's probably not what's happening here, but we'd need to make sure that that wasn't happening there, because that would be quite serious if your
Mm.
circulation was just randomly stopping.
Well, I have had this issue with runners before because they buy the shin splint sleeves
Yeah.
because they've got sore shins, but they don't get the right size, so it squeezes the calf too tight, which restricts the blood flow,
And then the
and then
foot
they
goes
get
black and
pains and
drops
numbness.
off.
Yeah, and then their foot gets numb because it's not getting the right amount of blood flow through it. So,
Brilliant.
so if there's anything on, like if you've got really tight leggings and they're really tight around your calves, I
It
have had that a few times before. People have struggled with it.
could be that. Is more likely to be that there's a nerve being compressed. Because
Oh,
that's the other
really?
way it can happen is if you actually compress a nerve. So sciatica is where it compresses in your spine. You can get numbness down the back of the leg if you bang your funny bone there, and you get the
Hmm.
fizzing going down there. Or if you
Oh, yeah.
lean on it, your little finger. I get this when I'm playing on my phone at night and I lean like that. I go numb on the outside of my hand because I'm
Oh,
compressing the nerve.
really?
Yep.
Oh,
So
okay.
if a foot's going numb, we need to know which bits, because that'll tell us if it is a
Hmm.
nerve being squished, which bits of the nerve is being squished. Could be at the ankle, could be in the midfoot, could be in the forefoot, could be in the knee, could
Hmm.
be in the spine. And we'd need to know why that was happening. Or it could be compression. It could be that something is too tight, either up
Hmm.
higher or down lower. That's the sort of thing you would need to know about. So I can give a general
So
answer on
more
that.
information, Alison. If Alison, you watched this and you saw your answer, come back to us. We're happy to relook at it next week, but we
Yeah.
need you to give us a bit more where and how and what's happening there,
And
and
I should,
we'll
as a
we'll chat about
disclaimer,
it.
say that this is general advice. So none of what we're
Of
hearing here
course.
constitutes clinical advice. Toenails, that's much easier. So
Hmm.
toenails are a genetic throwback. They serve no useful purpose. Um,
Oh, really?
they used to be useful for same thing we use our fingernails for grip. But
Hmm.
now they really don't do anything useful for us. So first thing is you don't need them. But if a toenail gets damaged, then it bleeds underneath the nail. That's why it goes black. The old nail sort of lifts, and a new nail comes up underneath it, and then pushes the old nail off. And when it reaches a certain point, it will just come off. It will just slough off, and you've got a little stubby bit of new nail growing up behind it, and then that becomes the new nail.
Hmm.
That happens
Hmm.
at the rate of approximately 1.5 millimeters a month. That's how quickly your toenails grow.
Oh, God, is that slow, is
Yep.
it?
Which is
Wow.
approximately the same speed as tectonic plates moving against one another, which is not a useful piece of information, but I always find it interesting. So if you keep losing
Yeah,
toenails, it's because
definitely.
your toenails are being battered around. And it's usually either shoes which are a bit too
Mhm.
small, which is sort of pressing on the end of it, or shoes that are a bit too large because you're moving around inside them.
Yeah,
Um,
banging, yeah.
and the best way for a running shoe to function is for it to be really snug. That's why ASICs come up really small on the
Mm.
sizes. That's the best thing for the function of your foot, but is not the best thing for your poor little toenails. So yeah, I'm afraid runners and
No.
dancers and footballers all lose toenails on the regular. Now, they will always grow back, but if you damage the matrix, the bit that it grows from, it will grow back a bit weird, a bit thicker, or not very
Hmm.
attached, or a funny shape. If you imagine that the matrix where the nail grows from is like a tube of toothpaste, and as you squeeze the
Hmm.
toothpaste, you get a nice round bit of toothpaste coming out. That's the toenail coming out. If you were to get a pair of pliers and just sort of
Yep.
mash the nozzle of the toothpaste and then squeeze it, everything that comes out is now going to be a funny shape.
It'll come out all up.
So if you
Hmm.
just damage the nail, it'll come off and you'll get a brand new nail exactly the same. If you damage the matrix of the nail that it grows from, it will grow back thick or misshaped or in some way knackered. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
once it's damaged, there is no bringing it back.
Oh,
Toenails are
that's
like
sad.
your teeth in your eyes. You get one good set and that's it. But unlike
Oh,
your
okay.
teeth in your eyes, you don't actually need them for anything.
Mm.
So if you're not fussed about the looks of the thing, if you're a chap who doesn't generally paint their toenails, Um, you either just keep them really short, or there's a very simple operation you can do where you remove the nail, cauterize the nail bed, and then there's no more toenail. So there's no more
Oh, and it
problem.
just stops it growing
Yeah.
anymore.
If you
That
do
makes
want
sense.
to have the option of prettier feet, and I know you do, Steve, with your OnlyFans
Of
and
course.
your side
My
income
cake
there,
smashing.
then as they grow, keep them trimmed really short and filed really short. And before
Yeah,
you
I
have
was
a
going to say,
run,
does leaving your nails get too long
yeah,
and then they're banging in your shoes?
absolutely.
So a good hygiene routine of keeping your nails trimmed.
Yeah,
I find because I used to get it like this is a bit gross, but you'd let your toenails get a little bit long, and then they'd squeeze together in your socks and you're running, and they'd dig in and cut the other side of your foot,
yeah.
or you'd get
Just
like blisters. Now, just keeping them really short and
yeah.
groomed is a good way to sort of avoid that.
It your toenails are a bit like kids' school shoes. You know,
Mm.
when you go shoe shopping with your kids and you spend sort of an hour and the gross national product of a small European country to buy the shoes that are exactly the
Yeah,
right
from
size.
Clark's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then 10 months later, when they go back, do you think their shoes are still the right size?
No.
Or palpably they're not. They can't be if they were the right size to start with.
Yeah.
Um, so your toenails are a bit like that. What people tend to do is if you say 10 is the point at which you would cut your toenails and 0 is
Mm-hmm.
how short they are when you cut them, people wait for it
Mm-hmm.
to get to 10 and then they cut them
Mm-hmm.
back to 0. And then wait for them to get to
Yes.
10, cut them back to 0. And some people, 10 is very, very, very long. The safer way of doing it is to wait for it to get to 7 and cut it back to 2.
Oh, okay.
Do it twice as often but keep
Mm-hmm.
it in that shorter range. So they're nice and short, nice and trim, but not too short, because then
Then
you
that
end up with
avoids like ingrowing toenails and things like that. Does
reduces
that
the
help
risk of
with that?
ingrown toenails. Yeah. So little and often is the way you cut your toenails. And if you have got knobbly nails, thick nails, misshaped nails, um, then you can have prosthetic nails built on.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple of systems that um, podiatrists, FHPs, some beauticians use them, where you basically build an artificial nail shape onto whatever it is. So you drill down all the dead stuff, all the thick stuff, and you'd build it on and
Mm-hmm.
you'd stick it on. They can last a couple of weeks, up to 6 weeks, 8 weeks even
Good for a
sometimes.
holiday or something
Exactly
if you've
that.
got to
So if
have
you're
your
getting
feet out.
married, you're going on
Yeah.
holiday, you want to get your feet out for the summer, even if you've lost your toenails, you can have new ones.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a permanent arrangement, it's just a temporary arrangement. Otherwise,
So
just
just
sure.
sorry, Rob, just one question. So I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow.
Maniac.
Um, what I'm not really, but what checklist would you go through to make sure I'm doing the best I can to avoid losing toenails the next day?
So for your feet, I would say before you run a marathon, first of all, check the inside of the shoes that you're going to be wearing. Put your hand inside, feel for any rough bits or bits which are the wrong shape. Check the lining, take the lining out, make sure that the lining isn't worn out because although the trainer should last 400 to 600 miles, the lining sometimes wears out sooner. In which case, you can just
Hmm.
put a new lining in there. Make sure your trainers are scrupulously dry.
Hmm.
So if you've gone out for a run and been all sweaty in your trainers and you just leave them by your front door with everything still in them, everything's festering
Hmm.
away overnight and it's all very soggy. So
Mm.
if you sweated a lot or if you've got rained on or run through puddles, open the laces right out, remove the lining, put them to one side, let it all dry very, very thoroughly. Pick the right
Good.
socks, the ones that you've been training in, and consider if you do get blisters or problems like that, multi-layering on the socks. Sometimes
Mhm.
two thin bamboo socks are better than one thicker cotton one. But obviously you
Okay.
experiment with that before, but make sure the socks are wicking well.
And running
Uh,
socks, are they worth the money?
say again?
Running socks, are they worth the money?
It
Buying proper
depends.
running socks, or
So, some people
yeah,
will
just
benefit, some people won't.
okay.
Then on the morning, trim your toenails short, but not too short.
Hmm.
Um, Good dusting of powder if you're prone to being sweaty between your toes, give it a really good sort of dusting and make sure everything is scrupulously dry before you put your feet in. Um, do your marathon or just get a taxi. I don't get this running thing. We have
You'd love
cars.
it.
I
Don't you
would not love
discourage
it.
them.
I
We
would
want them
not
to
love
run
it. Sorry,
forever.
they're wonderful. Marathons are wonderful. And then afterwards, take everything out of the shoes again, let it all dry out again. It's not a bad idea to give your feet a little soak in some cool water afterwards because they will be a bit more sort of
Would you use
puffy.
like Dettol in the water,
No,
like
no need,
when I
no
was a
need for
kid? You don't need
disinfectant.
to do anything like that. No,
No.
nothing like that.
If you've got any blisters, again, dry the skin out. If they're huge and they're going to pop and tear by themselves anyway, then by all means drain them and put a plaster over the top. If they're intact and they're likely to stay intact, just put a cover on it to let it heal up underneath. You don't want to de-roof a blister straight away.
Okay.
So if it's gonna de-roof itself, if it's like the size of a plum, and as soon as you put it in a shoe,
Mm.
it's just going to rip the skin back, then you
Yeah,
you
then it's
just drain the fluid out, plaster on it to keep it nice and flat. If it's not, if it's something that you'll get away with, cover it over even 3 or 4 days to let that new layer of skin toughen up a bit. Because the blister is
hmm
the reason it's got liquid there is that liquid is sterile and it's protecting that new skin as it grows. So you
yes.
don't want to de-roof it.
No, that makes
Um,
perfect sense.
yeah,
No, that's brilliant. Excellent. Well, I think we're gonna have to call it a day then, Rob. I think I've learned so much.
well, that's
It's
probably more than you wanted, but more
no,
detail.
not at all. I found it very interesting and I learned an awful lot. And I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to learning more.
So we'll see everybody next time then.
Thanks,
Cheerio, bye.
everyone. Thanks for joining in. See you next time.
And